Attention to orders.
You may observe a moment of silence. Tonight we take a moment to remember the precious lives lost in the mass shooting at Stoneman High School in Parkland, Florida on Wednesday, February 14th. 17 students and teachers were murdered in an attack by a mentally ill individual. Our thoughts and prayers are lifted for the families and to those lost and for the healing of those wounded. Please pause for this moment as our bell is sounded for each life lost. Local and Indiana veterans that have passed. Margie Ryan, U.S. Navy, World War II. Robert Bob Jones, U.S. Army, Vietnam, Morgan County Sheriff's Department, and Monrovia Police Department. Ronald Peters Sr., U.S. Marines, Vietnam. Doran Miller, U.S. Army, Vietnam, Johnson County Sheriff. Raymond Bishop, U.S. Army, Korea. Dennis Hatfield, U.S. Navy Seabee. Daniel Miller, U.S. Army, Vietnam. James Caparella, U.S. Army Air Corps, World War II. Ray Glasser, U.S. Army. James Harvey, U.S. Army Air Corps, World War II. Franklin Callan, U.S. Army, World War II. Max McClung, U.S. Army. William Gaunt, U.S. Army, World War II and Korea. Richard Gorson, U.S. Army Air Corps, World War II. Lee Ohio, U.S. Army. Eugene Rice, U.S. Navy, World War II. Richard Weaver, U.S. Army, World War II and Korea. Paul Bills, U.S. Army, Korea. William Butler, U.S. Army, Korea. Vernon Ritchie, U.S. Army, Vietnam. Dwayne Wood, U.S. Army. Richard Lauer, Indiana National Guard. Lauren Hyken, U.S. Navy, World War II. Leland Bush, U.S. Army. Lawrence Leland, U.S. Navy, Korea. Paul Carpel, U.S. Army, Vietnam. Jerry McMakin, U.S. Navy. John Smith, U.S. Air Force. Astino Lopez, U.S. Marines. Russell Moore, U.S. Navy, World War II. Har Alphen, U.S. Air Force. James Lynch, U.S. Navy. Floyd Lucas, U.S. Air Force. James Bratcher, U.S. Army. Rolly Evans, U.S. Navy, World War II. Larry Fry, U.S. Army, Vietnam. Eddie Garrett, U.S. Navy, World War II. James Hinton, U.S. Army, Korea. Richard Miller, U.S. Marines, Vietnam. Donald Rendersdorf, U.S. Army. Lee Bridgewater, U.S. Army, Korea. Donald Hillegas, U.S. Army. Paul Brown, U.S. Army, Vietnam. G. Thomas Pute, U.S. Navy. Leigh Hubble, U.S. Air Force. Stephen Schuyler, U.S. Army, Vietnam. Garvin Guffey, U.S. Army. Paul Solomon, U.S. Army, Korea. Raphael Foyer, U.S. Army, Korea. Bill Basford, U.S. Navy, World War II. Francis Alvey, U.S. Air Force, Korea. Arthur Newcomer, U.S. Navy, World War II. Charles Butler, U.S. Marines. Charles Stevens, U.S. Air Force. Wayne Swart, U.S. Army. Alan Nostowick, U.S. Navy. Harold White, U.S. Army, World War II. Jasper Tollison, U.S. Army, Vietnam. James Davis, U.S. Army. Donald Wheatley, U.S. Marines. Daniel Ballard, U.S. Army, Korea. Veterans around the nation. Hollis Brantley, U.S. Army, Korea. Edward Walmuth, U.S. Air Force, Korea. Walter Curtis, U.S. Navy, World War II and Korea. Albert Cunningham, U.S. Army. James Hayes, U.S. Navy and U.S. Air Force. Jack Bender, U.S. Army Air Corps, World War II. Robert Anderson, U.S. Navy. Charles Vance, U.S. Army, Korea. James Boyle Jr., U.S. Army, Korea. Robert Sell, U.S. Army. John Stiefhelfer, U.S. Navy. Jerry Phelps, U.S. Navy. George Presley, U.S. Army. Police and fire killed in the line of duty. Commander Paul Bauer, Chicago Police Department, Illinois. Officer Chase Maddox, Lotus Grove Police Department, Georgia. Officer Eric Joring, Westerville Division of Police, Ohio. Officer Anthony Morelli, Westerville Division of Police, Ohio. Officer Dylan Weathers, Detroit Police Department, Michigan. Officer Ryan McClune, North Chesterton Police Department, South Carolina. And Canine Officer Mojo, North Charleston Police Department, South Carolina. Rosie the Riveters, Ruth Anderson, Louise Brown, Helen Daniels, Mary Fairbanks, Zelia Frankel, Lorraine Ghazi, Elizabeth Shute, Rose Kopp, Alan Kozer, Sylvia Letchin, Valerie Marquette, Donna Messing, Bernice Qualls, Margaret Riley, Mildred Stoll, Christine Walton, Rose Janetti, and Elena Young. POWs recently recovered. Navy Machinist Mate First Class Arthur Glenn, killed during the attack on the USS Oklahoma in World War II. Was killed in action December 7, 1941. Remains recovered in 1943 and recently identified this year. Sergeant, all souls present and accounted for. Return your post, Sergeant. Order.